4 on the 1st of May. The new level, however, brings little change as most regulations remain firmly in place. Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs Minister Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma and Trade and Industry Minister Ebrahim Patel outlined some of the level 4 regulations. As Samkele Maseko reports, walking, jogging and going to bars remain forbidden.
At best, a slightly watered down lockdown. No local or interprovincial travel will be allowed. Only the economy is being opened in stage 4 and not the floodgates for everybody.
The lockdown is still there. There'll just be a few changes. But what is important is that there will be more people and more companies opening up and more people going to work. That's basically the major change. The rest, more or less, remains the same.
South Africans leaving their homes can only do so to buy essentials and to attend funerals. Traveling between provinces is still off limits, and leisure activities are certainly not returning.
Visiting is still not allowed. You can not visit your friends, visit your neighbors, visit your relatives. That is still not allowed. Exercise will be allowed, but under very strict conditions. Things like gyms will remain closed. Organized sports or walking or jogging is not allowed. We will put very strict regulations under which exercise can be done.
Sporting events remain restricted under level 4 regulations. The lockdown is essentially still in place with stringent measures to prevent more COVID-19 infections. Samkele Maseko, SABC News, Johannesburg.
And of course, our reporter who covered that, Samkele Maseko, following those proceedings at today's media briefing on some of the level 4 regulations. He joins us now live via Skype. A very good evening to you, Samkele. Great to see you there in what I assume is your living room, as we're having to work that way these days. Let's begin by getting some clarity on a number of issues. Firstly, and I suppose this is the one that most people are talking about. I mean, if you look at social media, for example, you will see a lot of people talking about the issue of cigarettes. It does seem that Minister Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma was quite clear on what she had to say to that regarding those regulations. Can you just talk to us, break it down for us about what exactly we're doing in terms of the sale of cigarettes and people just smoking?
Well, Flo, as of the 1st of May next week, in the words of President Cyril Ramaphosa, the sale of cigarettes will be permitted. But it seems as if the president may be facing some sort of resistance when it comes to the Presidential Command Council fighting the coronavirus. In particular, the former Minister of Home Affairs here in South Africa and now the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, who seemingly is not very chuffed about the decision by the president to allow the sale of cigarettes in the country. There was extensive lobbying being done by British American Tobacco. They sent out a number of alerts and a number of releases to various media organizations. Some were even sent to international broadcasters such as Al Jazeera to speak on this particular issue of allowing the sale of cigarettes in South Africa. But if you look at the words of the World Health Organization, in particular the Director General, Dr. Tedros, on their Twitter page, they've been very vocal that the tobacco industry is not being very patriotic to the World Health Organization and to the various countries that are battling with this pandemic of the COVID-19, South Africa being one of them, saying that if countries go ahead with the sale of tobacco or cigarettes, it will harm those who are infected and affected by this particular deadly COVID-19 virus. And the World Health Organization was lobbying various countries not to allow themselves to be bulldozed or arm strangled by these various tobacco industries in the sale of cigarettes. British American Tobacco seems to have won here in South Africa, but it's going to be interesting in the next Presidential Command Council, because it seems like Dr. Nkosazana Dlamini-Zuma, mainly after today's briefing, is gearing herself up for a fight to tackle this particular issue, since she's not a fan of cigarettes herself. Remember when she was still the Minister of Health here in South Africa, she was fighting this issue of cigarettes and South Africans smoking willy-nilly, and particularly the issue of puff and pass. Various companies had to have designated smoking areas. Restaurants had to have very designated smoking areas. So she's been an advocate and a fighter of strict and stringent regulations against the tobacco industry in this country, and she seems to be gearing up for another fight yet again next week in the Presidential Command Council.
You know, that brings me then to the question, Samkele, then of then saying, is the tobacco industry then pressuring the government, or are they attempting then to bully the government into relaxing those rules around the sale of cigarettes? Because that is a pertinent question as to, you know, if the government loses, I mean, that puts them on the back foot, doesn't it? Then you've got other industries who may be able to also make concessions that, look, we also need to come back. So this is quite important, isn't it, for the minister?
It's very important just for the minister, but also, Flo, this speaks to the greater mechanisms and the imaginations of how business and politics and governance intertwine within the South African sphere. Because the reality is you've got to go and follow, in the words of one minister who says, connect the dots and follow the money trail. So you've got to connect the dots and who funds, who donates who to the Solidarity Fund, who gets what in what exchange. So these are some of the issues you've got to connect, because you can never separate business and politics, not to cause any aspersions or to draw up to any conclusions. But it seems as if British American Tobacco, one of the companies that is in that particular sector, and the emails that we have seen and the reports that we've seen from other international media organizations, they've been on an intensive lobbying campaign, particularly here in South Africa, for it to be opened up, for cigarettes to be sold in the country. There are many of them who've expressed an opinion that they are happy that they can be able to buy cigarettes now at the shops. But there are many other South Africans who are also saying that the president was misled on this particular aspect of allowing cigarettes to be sold. He needs to go back and review this particular decision. So there has been intensive lobbying when it comes to this particular aspect. And whether the South African government or the president was armstronged on this particular matter, only time will tell. But it certainly seems as if there was some extensive backroom negotiations, and the president may have buckled under those negotiations that have been taking place, particularly within this aspect, and looking at what the Solidarity Fund has to be healthy.
All right, and then I also want to talk about another industry which also does seem to be trying to push its way back in, and that's the restaurant business. Do we now have, you know, sort of clarity in terms of what happens come the 1st of May regarding the opening of restaurants? There was talk of the fact that you could perhaps, you know, get a delivery, you could perhaps pick up. What exactly are we saying when it hits, when level 4 hits, when stage 4 hits? Where are we sitting in terms of restaurants?
Well, at this point in time, when it comes to the issue of restaurants, the Minister of Trade and Industry, Ebrahim Patel, basically said that there will be no sit-ins. So it looks as if I won't be dining with you in any of the restaurants anytime soon, or dining with any of our friends. So that's off the cards. So we still have to remain at home. Within that curfew that has been given to those who are employed, it's basically time for them to be able to take a quick duck, to make a few phone call or so, to have their items delivered at their doorstep. But at this point in time, there's no clarity on whether you can pick up. But we do know that Minister Ebrahim Patel says they're opening up restaurants for food to be delivered to people's homes. Also with that, it raises a few eyebrows, particularly I was speaking to one of the MECs in the provinces who says that that's going to be an issue, particularly when it comes to townships and the high levels of crime, particularly within the country. They've got to set out a time for food delivery items so that those who are delivering food are not in harm's way or are not subjected to attacks or being robbed or hijacked, particularly within the townships. And they've got to regulate that in an effective manner. So these are some of the issues that are being bantered about within government. But we do know that the Minister of Trade and Industry, Ebrahim Patel, is going to have another press briefing on Tuesday to further outline some of the outlets that are going to be opened and the timeframes for those particular outlets. All right,
and just a closing one, and very quickly, please, Samkele. You know, there's a lot of confusion about what's the main difference really between stage 5, I almost said load shedding, stage 5 and stage 4 of the lockdown. What is the sort of significant difference, the key difference really? So the South Africans are quite clear about the fact that, okay, I can do this, but I can't do that. And you know, there's been so much confusion anyway as we were were sitting in stage 5. So can you imagine when people are now trying to balance what they've become sort of used to and now going to stage 4? So what are the key differences between stage 5 and stage 4?
One of the restrictions that's still in place within this stage 4 lockdown, many of us are still traumatized by load shedding. I had that mistake earlier on during the day. I still can't have that barbecue that I've been wanting to have or to be invited to at your house. I still have to remain indoors. I still can't jog. I still can't exercise. I still can't walk my dog or puppy if I have a dog. I still have to remain indoors. And now with level 4, each time I leave the house to go get some essentials, I have to have a face mask on. That's now mandatory. But the difference now is that those whom the doors will be open for, level 4 is essentially opening up the doors for the economy. To unlock the economy, certain aspects of the economy, for people to go to work that which their companies will be reopening. So there is essentially not much of a difference between level 4 and level 5. Level 5 is essentially a full-on lockdown like we currently have now. Level 4 is a bit relaxed, where some industries are coming on stream, like restaurants can open up and deliver food. Certain retail shops can open up to sell items, for instance, to buy clothes for your son or your daughter or any of your kids for this winter period. Certain schools will be reopening in an incremental and phased manner, which the ministers of education, basic education and higher education, Minister Dr. Dlamini-Zuma and Minister Nkosazana would give a briefing on that particular aspect on Monday. So these are some of the relaxed issues. But more importantly, businesses can open, but businesses who open, they've got to test and screen their entire workforce, which will be a third of their entire workforce that will be returning for operations. They've got to screen and test those, and they have to have stringent measures that are in place for screening of their workplaces, and that no internal transmissions happen. But I still can't go to KwaZulu-Natal to go and visit my mother or grandmother. The only time I can go there is if there is a funeral and if I am a close family member. I can't go to a distant family member's funeral only, and it still remains at 50 people at a funeral at a time. So essentially, we are still in the regulations or the restrictions of stage 5, just a relaxation for those economic aspects that are coming on stream.
All right, Samkele Maseko, as always, a pleasure. Thank you so much. Many thanks to you. That's Samkele Maseko. Just giving us really an update on what was said in terms of where we go from the 1st of May, when, of course, stage 4 of the lockdown will then be implemented. So just some clarity there for you. Well, the battle over where to source funds for